Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and joining me as always is my co-host, Austin Davidson.
Hello.
It is season 4, episode 54 in Austin. The Pittsburgh Steelers dropped to 8-7 on the 2019 NFL season after a disappointing 16-10 loss in New Jersey at MetLife Stadium, a game which you attended. And the Steelers' playoff hopes are on life support, and for the second year in a row, it's going to be up to a Week 17, hopefully, win against the Steelers' opponent. This time it'll be the Ravens, and they'll also need help, this time from the Houston Texans against the Tennessee Titans. This particular game, the offense was once again the primary culprit. Devlin Duck Hodges was benched in the second quarter. He threw 2 costly first-half interceptions. Mason Rudolph, coming out of the bullpen for the second time this year, responded by playing one of his better games of the season. He threw a game-tying touchdown just before the half, but the offense could do no more beyond that. Rudolph left the game later with an injury, and Hodges couldn't lead the offense to any more points. So, again, the Steelers, with another disappointing loss against the Jets, they now no longer control their own playoff destiny and need to win and get help to get into the playoffs in 2019. Overall, a disappointing watch. I'm sure it was much more disappointing in person.
It was much more disappointing in person. I mean, you have all the Jets fans heckling around you, which granted, the stadium actually was about probably 65% Steelers fans, so there was that. So it made it a little bit not as bad, but I mean, you're still getting heckled and stuff, and you just see all this happening, and the offense is just failing, and you just see the defense. The defense reached my golden number. On the podcast, I said, they just got to keep the Jets to 16 and they can win. And anything more than 16 is a disappointment to me. And they got right there, and it's just the offense couldn't get it done. And it was overall just a sad experience. And the Steelers go to, I think, what is this? They're now 3-2 when I'm at the stadium, with 2 of those losses being to the Jets.
So maybe, I guess, don't go to any more Jets-Steelers games in New Jersey, huh?
Yeah, they're 1-2 against the Jets when I've gone.
What was the other one? What was the win?
The win was in the 2013 season when they started 0-4 and they got their first win against the Jets in the 5th week.
Yeah. Okay, so I do remember that. So I thought you had only been to one of those Jets games from 13 or 14. I knew you went to the 14 one, but so you have seen them beating the Jets before. How's the actual stadium itself? Because I mean, it's one of the newer facilities in the NFL.
I don't know. It's starting to lag behind, I feel like. Like, you look at all these nicer stadiums that are being built. Like, you look at Minnesota's. You look at the new one that's coming together in Vegas. It's starting to lag behind, actually, I think. I like, what's it called? I like Heinz Field and Orchard Park better, which are the only 2 other stadiums I've been to for football.
Now, that's interesting. In what way do you feel like it's lagging behind, out of curiosity?
I don't know. It just doesn't feel like it's like... It feels for a newer stadium. It doesn't feel that new. It feels older. While, like, Heinz Field is older, it just doesn't... They feel exactly the same. Like, I don't know how to put it other than that. Like, MetLife Stadium is supposed to be brand new. Well, not brand new, but it's supposed to be newer. But I don't know. It just doesn't feel that way.
That's interesting. I obviously have not been there, so I was just kind of curious on the overall experience. But it was still a good experience in terms of just comfort, right?
Oh, yeah. No, still pretty good. I mean, it was actually pretty good weather for a football game. 47 in the middle of December. I'll take that.
Very well, very well. I'll have to keep that in mind if I ever end up going to a game there. But hopefully, if I see a game there, it goes better than this one did for the Steelers. Again, a lot of games this season, especially as of late, have followed a similar script, at least in terms of when the Steelers have lost games. But another disappointing trend that continued was injuries. And the 3 big names that were coming out from Sunday's game as far as the injury report goes were first and foremost center Marquise Pouncey. He suffered a knee injury that appeared to be of the non-contact variety. It seemed like something popped when he was walking off the field. That was really concerning to see. He is being evaluated this week, but he's not likely to play next week that being said, he was not placed on injured reserve, so I'll take that as a bit of a good sign. I have to imagine that if he was severely injured or even somewhat moderately injured, given how many few games, the season could end this Sunday. So the fact that they didn't put him on injured reserve kind of makes me feel better that it's maybe not a very serious injury. But that being said, the Steelers still ended up promoting center J.C. Hassenauer to the active roster because of that. So obviously not the best thing to happen for Pouncey, who has had, several bad injuries in the past, so hopefully this isn't a very serious one. Running back James Conner is back on the injury report again this season. This was an unrelated one to his previous injury. This one was a thigh injury. The outlook is, again, not optimistic for this week's game, and to be honest with you, even if he could play, I think I'd keep him out. And last but not least, quarterback Mason Rudolph injured his left shoulder on the play where B.J. Finney stepped on his foot and tripped him. I think that was Finney's first snap at center. Rudolph was hit hard when he was trying to get up, and as a result, he had, I believe, a partial tendon tear, and he had surgery to clean that up. So he was placed on Christmas Eve on injured reserve, which pretty ironic. And what I noticed was Pro Football Talk tweeted that it was the saddest Christmas Eve sports headline in history because Rudolph went on injured reserve on Christmas Eve, and it made me sad.
Who will guide the sleigh tonight now? Who is going to guide the sleigh the next day?
It's a duck now.
Okay, you're going to have a duck in front of all the other reindeer. Got it.
Yep, just how we all would want it to go. And then other injuries that wasn't mentioned by Mike Tomlin was that Steven injury. He had a groin injury that kept him out of practice on Wednesday. He was a full participant on Thursday. A bunch of players were off on Wednesday, given that it was a holiday. The Steelers did actually practice, though. Most teams didn't, but the Steelers did. So I just wanted to make note of that. And thank you for typing that up, Austin, because I do remember that Nelson was injured, but I forgot to type that up earlier, so thank you. So as far as the game goes, where do you want to tackle this one first? How about we just start with the way this game started? So the Jets, again, only 16 points that they scored, but 7 of them came on what was an impressive opening drive.
That opening drive just really felt bad. It really didn't. It just really, really hurt. I was hoping for the Steelers to start the game with a 3-and-out and try and stop that, but it just felt like whatever New York wanted to do, they were just able to do it. And I mean, the biggest thing was probably the 3rd and 3 where it was incomplete, but Minkah Fitzpatrick had the defensive pass interference. I don't know if that should have been pass interference or if it should have been a illegal contact instead, because it seemed like he got the hit off before the ball was even delivered. So I find that the call was a little bit ticky-tacky. I think it should have been a penalty, but it's a difference of 5 yards or 14 yards. So I don't know if that would have quite stopped their drive because they were able to keep going. But after watching the replay, it's just like I didn't like the call of pass interference. And you would see later in the game it didn't go the Steelers' way on another thing where that same thing happened, where James Washington was his arm got grabbed before the ball got to him, and it was illegal contact before rather than pass interference, which I thought was the right call, but they didn't do that here. So I just disagreed with that ref call, but overall just not a good start. And I mean the what's it called? Both Joe Hayden and Terrell Edmonds were in good position to stop that touchdown. It's just Jamison Crowder made a good play. I mean, what can you really do?
It was Robbie Anderson, actually. But
Robbie Anderson, I'm sorry.
That was actually I saw that play. I didn't see it live because I was still at work at the time. But that, to me, looked like just a fantastic individual play by both Darnold and Robbie Anderson. I don't know about the rest of the drive. I mean, you just mentioned the penalty there, but it seemed like for that particular play, that was just a great offensive play, and sometimes that's going to happen.
Yeah, and there was a fumble on that first drive as well. You wish that the Steelers were able to get that, but, I mean, it is what it is.
Overall, when you're talking about this team and this defense, were you like that mad or like concerned? Because the way I see it is that eventually some team is going to score an opening drive touchdown. It happens from time to time. I wasn't overall that mad because in the scope of things, again, only 16 points against. So I wasn't as frustrated about it as I think most people were, but I also didn't see it. I saw the last play, so I don't know how that drive unfolded. It can be a very different vibe, certain drives, as we know.
Yeah. Well, I do think, what's it called? I was worrying, but like you said, I was more mad at the time. Like, come on, man. Like, is this really how the game is going to go? Where they're going to give up the offense to the Jets? Like, but they turned it around, so it was okay. And like you said, there's at some point there was going to be a script where the opposing team had an answer for the defense, at least to open it up, and that's what happened.
And as things continued to go poorly for the Steelers offense as it has all season, they take the opening drive. They move the ball a little bit on the opening drive, but as they get close to midfield, in fact, they had just crossed midfield, a 3rd and 10, a poorly blocked play where a defender comes free at Devlin Hodges. I believe Ramon Foster was slow in picking up a blitz, and Hodges has to rush the throw, never sees the linebacker. I believe his name was Basham, and he picks him off of a pass intended for McDonald. And again, we're talking about not turning the football over being the key for this offense, and they turn it over on their first drive. It's something we've talked about all season, and it's something that continues, especially in the losses, something that has not changed.
Yeah, it was just really upsetting. The offense just really couldn't get it together, and like you said, for the second week in a row, the offensive line wasn't playing well. And it started here. There was a free man coming to depth pressure, and he threw that interception, and it's just like you hate to see it, but what can you do?
And the offensive line, let's start talking about them a little bit, because this has never been a great run-blocking offensive line, at least this current collection. They've been solid at it. They were better at it last year, but they've always been able to hang their hat on being good pass protectors. We haven't really seen that as consistently as we're used to seeing. We've seen several games where they've struggled. Some of that was against now, as we know, really good competition like the Patriots and the 49ers. But we've seen them struggle in a couple of weeks now, and with things that they are typically really great at. For years, what was probably the thing that we said that they're better at than maybe any other offensive line? It was picking up blitzes and twists and stunts. And if you want to say, yeah, maybe last week was a fluke, that's fine. But we've seen it now. The Jets ran very similar blitz packages to what the Buffalo Bills ran last week, and the Steelers were just unable to pick it up, whether it was guys just seemingly forgetting assignments. Matt Filer left a guy unblocked. Ramon Foster left guys unblocked multiple times. Villanueva was beaten a couple of times. It was just a really bad game for all those guys. And then obviously you have Marquise Pouncey getting hurt, and then the bad snaps from him and B.J. Finney. I don't really know what to make of it. It's easy to point the finger at the offensive line coach, but I think that this is the first time I've really been able to think and say it's really on the whole collection, really all five or really in this case 6 offensive linemen. They have just not been good the last couple of weeks, and I have some concerns about some of these players going forward.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's reason to be. I mean, you see it happening 2 weeks in a row, and I do think a lot of that has to be on the scheme. If you're letting the same thing happen to you 2 weeks in a row, I think it says a lot about preparation, more than a player's skill. But so I do put a lot of the blame on the offensive line coach, but like you said, overall they need to play better. There's no excuse for what Ramon Foster did in this past game. There's several plays where John slowed it down for me and showed me and actually what was Ramon Foster doing, and we just had to guess what was he even thinking. He had a really tough day against the Jets, and then other guys like the centers both had struggled with bad snaps even before Marquise Pouncey. It was just not a good day. So I mean, you have to hope that next week it's going to be a little bit better. I mean, the one of their nose tackles, Brandon Williams, they're better next week and they can get it together and figure out how to scheme around these blitzes that the past 2 weeks the Bills and the Jets have done. And hopefully the Ravens either don't attempt or the Steelers are able to work around it. But I mean, hopefully the decline of the offense line doesn't continue because it's just not been good over the past couple of weeks.
I need to point out that I am a little concerned about Ramon Foster. I feel like I'm starting to see a little bit of a decline here, and it has been only a few bad games lately, but it feels like he's just slower to me than ever. He's not. So, there are some times where he's forgetting to pick guys up, but to me it was also he's forgetting. He's not just forgetting, but he's also just not fast enough. Like on the Devlin Hodges interception, the first one, he was literally just too slow in picking up a guy. A guy got around him. And that's the thing that I feel like we've always said about Ramon Foster is that he's never been, spectacular, eye-popping. He's always just been Mr. Consistent. And that has been his biggest indictment this year is that he hasn't been.
And that makes you worry when you're a guy that's always been consistent isn't consistent in like what? How many years has he been in the NFL now? Like 14? Where it's a lot.
He's been there. He's the second longest tenured player on the team. His first season was 2009. So he's the second longest tenured player behind Roethlisberger.
So at 10 seasons. So he's been there for a while. Like that's cause for concern. That it is about time where players do decline. Like most players don't play at a high level or a consistent level for this long. So it is concerning. And B.J. Finney has his own concerns. So Steelers might have a problem at guard going forward after this year.
Well, let's talk about that right now then, because B.J. Finney has kind of always been thought to be groomed as someone that could replace Foster. Their contracts Foster still would have one more year, but Finney's contract is up at the end of this year. With Foster's play seemingly in decline at this point in time, Finney would have seemed like the logical choice to replace him, but Finney has struggled a little bit this year too. And there's questions about is it a good idea to pay him? And then there's everything that happened with the Rams game when the Steelers benched him in favor of moving Matt Filer over. So there's that to consider. And there's the fact that, when you think about that the Steelers might consider moving Matt Filer to guard anyways. So they might not even think about using B.J. Finney anyway. So Finney and Foster, the two guys that we thought would be the starting left guard going into next season, there's a chance neither of them are going to be on the roster next year.
Yeah, they might decide to move on from Finney. Not move on from him. They might not offer him a contract since his contract is up. And Foster could just be a cap casualty as they try and pay other players, and they might have to get a guard either in free agency or the draft. It's going to be interesting to see what they do going forward. But rolling with Finney is just there's so much to consider. They didn't trust him enough to play against the Rams, which granted, you're playing against one of the best players in football regardless of position. So I could understand not wanting to play a guy like B.J. Finney that may be a little bit undersized for that, but worrisome. If you can't start a guy, if you're not confident with starting a guy every week, it's just like, would you be against every team? Would you be able to roll with him as a starter going forward? It just, I don't know. The Steelers have a lot of questions going forward.
I think even if I do understand why they did what they did, I still think it speaks volumes to what they thought of him. And I know we were talking a little bit about that before. But if, like you said, if you can't put your faith in a guy in every game, how is that going to change going into next year? And furthermore, there's more depth on the outside. So if you end up kicking Filer inside, which is what I think they are most likely to do if they do get rid of Ramon Foster, you still have Banner and Okorafor as tackles, so you still have another starting tackle and a swing tackle, so then you'd only have to replace an interior guy.
And that would probably be best.
Very strange how we ended up getting here, because Finney started three to 4 games a year since he joined the Steelers in 2015, 2016. And I think we've thought this whole time that he was going to be the guy to replace Foster, but now there's a chance that he's not, and I just honestly wasn't expecting that.
It's just, I don't know. I really don't know going forward. As a meaningless stat since the team game, the Steelers are 10-1 every time B.J. Finney has started. He's played 11 games since being with the Steelers. And this he's going to start against the Ravens more than likely at center. So there's that as well. So hopefully that plays in their favor. But, I mean, the team has done fine when Finney starts. It's just it might just be luck.
Vinny's also been a better guard than a center throughout his career, which is interesting because he was a center in college.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, he's played better at guard. The center position, he just seems to make a lot of errant snaps.
What else? The tight ends were quiet again. Vance McDonald had 3 receptions, though, which is seemingly a lot compared to what we're used to him having. Nick Vannett had an 18-yard grab. This is one position group that I feel like has been, maybe besides the quarterback position, the most disappointing unit on the entire offense this year. I can't look at a single guy and say that they have done as well or better than I expected. Obviously, Vance McDonald has been pretty disappointing. Nick Vannett's been really quiet this year. Maybe Xavier Grimble's the only guy that met my expectations this year, a guy that got waived like 2 weeks into the season. And I just think that that's wild to think about. A lot of it you can probably pin on the quarterback play, but I think the tight ends have left so much to be desired this year.
Man, like there's only one good game where I could think of where it's like, oh wow, yeah, the Titans had a good game, and that's when Vance McDonald got 2 touchdowns from Mason Rudolph in relief of Ben Roethlisberger in the Seahawks game. So that's like it. That's literally it. Other than that, the Titans have just been a massive disappointment this year, and I will say they are the biggest disappointment. I didn't expect Devlin Hodges to do anything good. He's an undrafted free agent. Mason Rudolph, maybe a little bit higher expectations since he was a first-round pick, and we're kind of expecting that. But it's still like he's still young, and he only had very little experience, so that's fine. Him not playing good was not desired, but, I mean, it wasn't unexpected either. It could have gone either way. Not every draft pick is going to be great, and he was a third-round draft pick. There's a reason why other teams didn't draft him in the first round when the Steelers gave him first-round grade. The tight ends, however, Vance McDonald, he should have been doing good this year. Vannett, not as great, but, I mean, we're expecting a little bit more. I believe he has 12 catches for 110 yards on the year, and that's it. So that's not great for him. And, I mean, like you said, the tight end 3 has just been whoever's been around. Zach Gentry, I think, caught his first pass like last week or 2 weeks ago. He hasn't done much. He hasn't been active much, and he shouldn't be. And then Xavier Grimble was, like you said, expected. He wasn't expected to be good. He's a tight end 3.
Yeah, so you look at McDonald this year, he has 36 catches, which, you know, he's not far off. He had 50 catches last year. He's probably going to finish with 40. That's not a huge drop-off. He's going to have probably 3 touchdowns compared to 4 last year. But the big drop-off is in yardage. He had 610 yards last year. He has just over 250 this year. He's averaging 5 less yards per catch this year. So he's definitely not, and that's the other thing too, is maybe he's not being thrown the ball down the field as much. I feel like he's been exclusively a check down for the most part too.
That's really been it. Like you said, part of the problem is the quarterbacks. Quarterbacks really hate targeting them. I don't know what it is. I don't know if they're just really bad at reading in that part of the field or what, but like the quarterbacks have been avoiding anywhere down the middle of the field, like anywhere past 5 yards down the line of scrimmage. Like, it's just ridiculous. And that's where Vance McDonald, I think, would thrive, and Nick Vannett would do better as well. But that's really Vance McDonald's spot. The quarterbacks just haven't been good at targeting in the middle of the field.
I think part of it has been the injuries to Juju Smith-Schuster. I think that probably has a lot to do with it. And you couple that with the fact that these guys just aren't the most athletic tight ends in the league, so maybe they struggle to get separation. And when you have young quarterbacks, I think they tend to prefer their guys be college open, which is, extra wide open, because, in the NFL you have tighter windows. So I'm not trying to say that the tight ends are blameless here, but I'm thinking that might have at least some explanation for why they've been so quiet this year.
That is fair. That is a fair evaluation. It does. There's always multiple layers to any reason why people are doing bad.
So going forward, if you had to guess, do you think the Steelers are going to bring back Vannett and McDonald next year, or just one of them, or possibly neither of them?
I got to think Vance McDonald is a cap casualty. I could think of using that money somewhere else, and I think that I'm very torn. I don't know if the tight end market is going to be stable or if it's going to go down or go up. But I feel confident that the tight ends can there could be a free agent tight end brought in instead, because you need, for the amount of money Vance McDonald's being paid, you got to put that to like Bud Dupree or someone else, or Tyler Matakevich, who is also on an expired contract, who's done really well on special teams, snubbed from the Pro Bowl also. But the point is, Vance McDonald's money can be used elsewhere, and I think that because of the mistakes of Nick Boyle and Tyler Kroft getting like $6 million each, and Jesse James getting his major contract, I think that the tight end market's going to crash. But I believe George Kittle is due for a contract as well, which hurts it, because George Kittle's going to get a massive contract and he deserves it. So this is where I said I don't really know where the tight end market is going to go. But I feel like you could get a tight end for cheap that could perform the same amount as Vance McDonald has done. And I'd rather be able to hold on to, let's say, Bud Dupree and Tyler Matakevich just because of that.
So if you think the Steelers are going to be getting rid of McDonald, do you think that they'll end up bringing back Vanette or someone else? Because if they get rid of one of those guys, I have to think they're going to draft one, because that makes tight end pretty much the premium position to draft, even ahead of offensive line, because then you don't have a starting tight end.
Yeah, I think that you keep Vanette. I think that because you traded a fifth-round pick for him, you basically do anything to keep him. Not like a massive contract, but like probably a little bit more than he would have made on the market. I think that Vanette's going to come back. You're
willing to kind of spend a little bit more to keep your investment, so there's more incentive to keep him after you've spent something to get him.
You never know. Maybe with a full training camp, learn a lot more time to learn the playbook and stuff, maybe he'll do a little bit better too. Just gives him a little bit extra time.
I mean, Exhibit A is Vance McDonald. Look at how much better his second year in Pittsburgh was compared to his first.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, I think it's worth holding on to Vanette, even though he didn't have a massive year this year. I mean, he's a tight end, too. I know I wasn't really expecting a lot from him when he came over, just a little bit more. And then maybe hope that the Lions cut Jesse James and you bring him back.
So I know we've kind of devolved into less analysis about the game itself and more into just overall talking about the offense this upcoming offseason, but I think these are conversations that we need to have right now. Is that fair for me to think that this is something we need to talk about?
I think it's fair. I mean, you just lost to the Jets. You lost 16-10 to the Jets, and there's a lot of positions struggling on the offense. When we get to the defense, we're not going to really be talking about this because the defense did fine. We're talking about this because the offense is really, really in bad shape right now.
All right. I just want to make sure that we're still on the same page, and there's obviously more we can talk about with the offense in the game, but I think we did a good job of kind of opening things up. So let's kind of get to running back now. Look, James Conner, when he was healthy in this game, when he's been healthy this season, he's been good. The problem is he hasn't really been healthy much. James Conner leaves with injury again. I believe he's missed, 5 games this year and has been injured in 4 others. So that's 9 games this season where he's either not played or has left during the game. As much as he is a fan favorite for obvious reasons, he's a fantastic person, and he's one of the strongest individuals to ever stood up for the Pittsburgh Steelers or ever play in the NFL. But at the end of the day, going into next year, I don't think you can rely on him as being your starter. The Steelers' running game has been so much better when he's been able to play this year, but he just hasn't played much at all. And the offense is, in a year where the offense has needed everything it can get out of its 2-star players and Juju Smith-Schuster and James Conner, they just haven't gotten enough from James Conner.
He hasn't delivered, and it's mostly because he has been injured. I mean, early on it was rough. It was just really not much was happening.
More here is James
but like every time he plays as of late, like he's been decent. It's just he hasn't been able to stay on the field. Every few weeks, it's just a new injury. It's this, it's that, it's all this in between, and it's gonna follow him around. That he has an injury problem. So it's gonna be hard to say what to do going forward. Because, being a fan favorite from Pittsburgh, you want the Steelers to keep him, but, he hasn't been able to put together a full season. It's just he's always been injured, so it's going to be tough going forward. And in this game, he had a few nice rushes. He had a 15-yard rush, and I believe he had a 7-yard rush before he got in 2 of his 6 carries. So he did good, and he has done good. And maybe if he plays, the Steelers are able to win this game because he was able to rush against one of the historically good rush defense. I believe that the Jets are allowing the lowest yards per carry in NFL history right now. Which I didn't know until I got in the game and I saw it on the big screen. But I knew they were doing good. They did well against the run. But James Conner looked like he was doing well against the team, and just stinks that he just can't stay healthy.
His numbers this season in terms of efficiency are not that far off compared to what we've typically seen for him. He does only have one fumble. Of course, it was a crucial one against the 49ers, but he has just one fumble this year. He still has 4 touchdowns, and he's averaging 4 yards a carry. But again, his effectiveness is key to him being on the field, and he just hasn't been. The rest of the guys, Benny Snell was quiet in this one. Jalen Samuels was, again, quiet. He dropped another pass. I know that I was big on Samuels coming out because I really liked the fact that he was versatile, but he's a jack of all trades, master of none, and especially emphasis on master of none. I feel like he's just really not. There's nothing that he really brings to the table that really makes you go, wow, at this point. And it's disappointing, but I need to see more growth from him before I think that he can be a legitimate part of this offense.
Yeah, I will say that screen was a thing of beauty, which is more scheme than anything. I saw that screen develop, and the blocking was set up perfectly for him on that, to where he got that 27-yard game. That was nice, but, I mean, overall just not good. And what made me really sad with Jalen Samuels in this game was on one of the really good drives with Devlin Hodges, that ended in an interception. That interception, the ball was intended for Jalen Samuels in double coverage. Why would you do that to yourself? You had Juju Smith-Schuster on the right side. You had someone underneath, or actually that might have been Juju, now that I think about it. Regardless, anyway, it just made me sad that Jalen Samuels was the best target in double coverage, and it ended up in an interception. So there was that. It's just I think he's an okay pass catcher. It's just in this game, I don't know. It's so hit or miss. He just, like you said, it's the best way you put it is that he does a lot, but he's a master of none. He's just not that good he's not good enough at anything where it's just amazing or impressive.
Yeah, and I was hoping to see more growth, but I think the problem is you really see how little he's carried the ball when he was in college and high school, because he doesn't seem to have that much vision, and he's just not a very powerful runner behind the offensive line. So I have my concerns about him going forward. That interception that Hodges threw, by the way, from your perspective, because I only saw the replay of it, it looked to me like if Hodges threw the ball earlier and didn't put so much air under it, that might have gotten there in time. And then all I could think about when I saw the play made was how the Jets safety made the play where it felt like 2 weeks prior Terrell Edmunds had the same play and whiffed on it.
Yeah, that hurts. Well, so from my perspective, I watched the mesh route all the way through. I saw it. I was like, he's got the separation. Just get the first down and keep moving the chains. And then I saw him. So I honestly, I didn't watch Jalen Samuels. I was looking at the guy who was open. I can't remember who it was. It might have been Juju. It's just there's someone on. It was 3rd and 3, and there was someone on running a mesh route on the 3-yard line, like three yards down. But they were open. But that's all I saw on that play for the most part until I saw him throw it and then throw it into double coverage.
Okay. All right. Back to the running back. So we already talked about Samuels. Benny Snell's been okay, but hasn't been as good as James Conner. I really like what I see from Kareth White. I understand that he's still learning the playbook, but I kind of want to see him get a little more involved because I feel like he's been the second best running back the last few weeks.
He's busted off some big ones, and maybe not so much in this game. He only had, his longest was a 7-yard run, but he busted off some pretty big ones. I would like to see him get more carries. I think that he would be a good back for that. I think pass blocking situations, though.
And then wide receivers. Deontay Johnson is having a rookie season. Again, I think Juju Smith-Schuster has ruined rookie seasons for all Steelers receivers. Deontay Johnson is 6 catches shy of tying the Steelers franchise record for catches by a rookie receiver in a season. He doesn't have a ton of yards because a lot of the passes he's been thrown by quarterbacks have been short, but he has 5 touchdowns this year, and he has 55 catches. Sorry about that. And he still has over 620 yards. So I'd say my biggest issue with him this year has been ball security, but he's been a spark plug for the offense this year. And going into the year, I'm pretty sure I set my over-under at receptions for him this year at like 28, because I did not expect him to be a huge, I don't think the Steelers did either, to be a huge part of the offense, and yet here we are. He's been maybe the co-rookie of the year for this team.
Yeah, he's actually been really well. He caught 8 of his 9 targets. He did really well, and one was very important. He got the only touchdown for the Steelers of the game, and I mean, he's been playing really well as of late. He's just been really, really good, and the Steelers continue to be really good at drafting wide receiver, really getting value out of their guys.
James Washington, another guy, not as flashy as far as the numbers go, but he came up with a few huge plays. Could have come up with what looked like it could have been the game-winning touchdown against the New York Jets in the final couple plays there. We were talking about that before we started recording, how you didn't really see because you were there, but Washington was so close to coming up with that play, and I said that it was a tougher catch to make there than his touchdown against the Browns from a couple weeks ago, where he had the ball in his hands, but the Jets safety ripped it away with just one hand when Washington had both his hands on it. It's one where you really wish and think that Washington would come up with that ball more often than not, but you also don't want to knock the guy for dropping a pass like that, because it is a difficult pass to come up with. That's just one that leaves you with a sour taste in your mouth.
It just really sucks because who it is. I mean, like, if that was Deontay Johnson or anyone else, it's just like, or Deion Kane, something like that, like, you don't feel as bad, but, like, that's what James Washington has been excelling at in the past couple weeks, making those tough grabs and stuff like that. And you saw what he did against the Browns. It just, like, it seems like that one's easier, but like you said, you can't really harp on him too much. Marcus May made a good play on the ball, and, I mean, it is what it is. The Steelers had chances after that, and they weren't able to succeed. But James Washington did have a nice 13-yard grab on 3rd down and 12 that kept the chains moving around in the game. So that's something I remember from him, something that he did. Didn't finish with the most yardage in the game, but still, he was still pretty solid, I thought.
And let's wrap it up with the quarterbacks. So we've seen a good amount from both of these guys. Let's take a moment to digest what they've done through the 2019 season. Obviously, Hodges is going to get one more crack at it in Week 17 against the Ravens, but just your thoughts on Rudolph and Hodges this year. Hello? Hello. Looks like we lost Austin there. I think we just lost internet connection, so I'm going to pause this. All right, we're back. Sorry about the technical difficulties there. We are back up and running. So, Austin, I was going to ask you about your thoughts on Mason Rudolph and Devlin Hodges. Now we've gotten through 16 games, and they both played a good handful this year. They both had to come off the bench. They both started games. And just your 30,000-foot view on both Mason Rudolph and Devlin Hodges and kind of what you think about them maybe going forward. Not a huge sample size for either, but we kind of have a bit of a taste of what these guys are right now.
What I find strange with both these two is that they both got worse over time. I mean, with Mason Rudolph coming into... I'm ignoring Mason Rudolph coming into this game, because Mason Rudolph came into this game against the Jets, and it actually looks like he was going to lead the Steelers to a victory, but Mason Rudolph started pretty solid. He didn't do too bad. It wasn't terrible. And then just as time went on, it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And then Devlin Hodges comes in, wins the first 3. And he wasn't overly impressive, but he wasn't losing you games. He really starts throwing massive and then just is starting to lose you the game because he throws 4 interceptions or 2 interceptions. And it's just so weird to me that they get worse over time. The game should be getting easier as time goes on. I don't really understand. Mason Rudolph came back into this game, like I said. It actually looks like he learned something. I think, I don't know if I said it on the podcast or if I just said it speaking to John, but I was more in favor of just starting Paxton Lynch if you're going to bench Devlin Hodges. They didn't do that, and that was the right call. Mason Rudolph actually played really well when he was in there. It felt like I said, the Steelers were going to be able to win. But it unfortunately, he got hurt. The shoulder injury that got him on IR happened. So, I mean, it is what it is. And then Devlin Hodges came back in and only threw for 84 yards and those 2 touchdowns. And those touchdowns really loomed large, especially that one in Jets territory. That one stinks that you weren't able to get a field goal there when it could have been the difference maker. But again, it is what it is. So as a whole, the seasons are up and down. Both came in and looked impressive at times, and then over time just became lackluster and/or bad in their worst forms. I mean, both threw 4 interception games, so there's that. I mean, they just don't. Going forward, I think the Steelers need a backup for sure. I think the Steelers are going to need to pursue probably a free agent backup, a guy that's a little bit more of a veteran, rather than try and draft another quarterback. But I mean, I'm really open to both options at this point. I mean, I think you get rid of Devlin. I think because he's undrafted free agent, he'd be first to go when you gave Mason Rudolph a first-round grade and drafted him in the 3rd round. But both are on thin ice and both can be replaced, in my opinion, at this point. And I mean, if a team really came, I don't. If the Jags will offer a 5th-round pick for Josh Dobbs, I don't rule out anything. If a team offers anything for Mason Rudolph, you take it, I think, and you try and get a better backup. Even if it's like a 7th-round pick, I think that then you get 2 quarterbacks. But regardless, overall, I'm not confident in either of these guys going forward.
So you think that neither of them could theoretically take over at some point?
Not right now.
I guess kind of what I'm getting at is I still need to see more. I think you really need to see more games from both of them before you can come up with a definitive answer. But it's quite clear that they both struggled at times this year. What I think is interesting is who do you think had the higher peaks and the lower valleys? Because I was thinking about this, and people seem to have a different answer than me, but I have my reasons for my particular answers, so I want to hear your answers and why.
So, I think the highest high... Damn, it's a hard question. I think... Damn. So, I'm going to say the lowest low was Mason Rudolph. I think that his 4 interception game was worse than Devlin Hodges. I don't really know why. I think it just felt like because Mason Rudolph was drafted with a higher pedigree that it hurts more, and that Devlin Hodges shouldn't have been succeeding. So I'm going to say Mason Rudolph had the lowest low, and the highest high. Might have also been Rudolph. It's just when he threw two touchdowns or immediately against the Seahawks, that was probably his peak, and I don't think any moment Devlin Hodges has overcome that. It might have been the Browns game for Devlin Hodges, but I guess Mason Rudolph has had the highest high. It just feels weird saying. I don't know. What's your answer?
That's actually very interesting because that's kind of what I was thinking too, but I saw people saying that Rudolph had the lowest valley and Hodges had the highest peak, and Hodges having the highest peak came from the 3 straight wins and the fact that he took care of the ball better. And I think that that's fair. I'm not here to say that that's wrong, but I think Rudolph had the higher peak because of the way he played. I felt like he was more in control of the game than Hodges ever was, and by that I mean more so that this team leaned on him a little more at times, like in that Seattle game. He threw an interception in that game that was not his fault at all. His first start in his career came in San Francisco against a team that might be the best in the league. Meanwhile, Hodges' first start came on the road, yes, but that came against a team that doesn't have a home crowd. That was a 90% Steelers crowd, and I feel like Rudolph has been asked to do more. So I think Rudolph played better football in his first few games, pretty much up until when he got knocked out by Earl Thomas, and I thought he played pretty well again on Sunday. But I also think his valleys were worse too. The one argument I'd make against Hodges' 4-interception game being worse is that Rudolph's game was coming on a Thursday night when there was very little time to prep. And Hodges' game came at home against the Buffalo Bills. But I think that's kind of offset when you think about the Browns' defense isn't nearly as good as the Buffalo Bills. But I thought that was an interesting kind of discussion point because I think it's fair to argue either way, to be honest with you.
And there really is an argument for both. It depends on how you look at it.
I'd definitely bring both guys back for camp, and I'd let them compete with a veteran backup. I don't know who, but I mean, we've seen names like Phillip Rivers, Eli Manning. I've seen a bunch of different names. I think most of them are not as feasible. I think a couple names that could be interesting because, again, backup quarterbacks are still expensive. What about one of the two quarterbacks from Miami in Fitzpatrick or Josh Rosen?
I like Fitzpatrick. I think I like him chilling around and just continuing his journeyman job and just being good with Pittsburgh because, I mean, Fitzpatrick is so weird. He plays good and then just, will play bad the next year. So I guess I wouldn't want him that mean since he's playing actually pretty decently with Miami.
He's right on now, two straight good years, so he's definitely due for a bad one.
Yeah, so I don't know. I like Fitzpatrick, though. Being reasonable and actually not, joking around, I do like Fitzpatrick. I don't like Rosen, personally. I mean, Rosen has been given, I say that. Rosen's been thrown into some terrible situations, and maybe playing with the Steelers would help him a little bit because maybe it gives him a little bit better, but the offense with Pittsburgh right now is terrible, too. It's not even like it's better than Miami at the moment, which kind of is really sad to say. But it would be kind of a lateral move. I don't know. It's just he plays with a better team overall. I don't know if that helps him. I don't know. I like Fitzpatrick. I am holding hope for Mariota. I'm hoping Mariota is a little bit cheaper on the market because he was so bad and that he got benched. I'm not sure that it's so hard to predict what these quarterbacks will get on the market because to me, Mariota is bad. And he should be getting not that heavy of a contract comparatively, but I mean, a team might see some potential in him and still give him a big contract. Do you remember when the Bears gave, was it Glennon a $14 million contract or was it McCown? I'm confusing my quarterbacks.
I think they both got a big money.
Yeah, regardless, the Bears, after drafting Trubisky, paid another bad veteran quarterback like $14 million a year, which is a ridiculous amount. And they ended up cutting him by the end of the year because it was just stupid. They ended up starting him at first. So the point is, bad quarterbacks can still get a lot of money, and the Steelers don't really have enough room to do that. And that's what I think might happen with Mariota. A team might be like, well, he's young. He could just have been in the wrong system. He might have succeeded better in an offense that, he had in Oregon? Did Mariota went to Oregon,
that's
right?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah. I'm bad with the college football if that's not already known. But regardless, I would like Mariota, I think. I'd like to give him a chance if that is feasible, but I'm not sure if it is. The most unfeasible thing I've seen is Teddy Bridgewater. I don't know what people think Teddy Bridgewater is going to get on the market. Teddy Bridgewater is going to get starting quarterback money from somewhere. If he doesn't, he's staying with the Saints. He's going to either inherit the Saints and stay with them until he could get a big boy contract, or he's going to go somewhere where he can start and is going to get a big boy contract. It's just I don't know where people think that the dude went 6-0. He's not hidden. He's not a hidden gem. When he was forced to start, he went 6-0, and he's been good since he was with the Vikings. And then he played well with the Jets, and it just keeps going. That's the most unfeasible to me because he's young, he's good, and he could still be the face of a franchise.
Followed shortly behind by Phillip Rivers.
Yeah. Yep. Phillip Rivers at least is old and he's been playing bad, but I mean,
he's still making $15 million next year.
And there's no way he's less than that. Glennon got $14 million 3 years ago. Salary cap inflation at least means that he's going to get 15, and he's likely to get 20. And he might be a starter somewhere. I don't even know. We'll see.
I honestly don't think the Steelers are going to be able to get any of these guys. The reason I brought up Rosen is because he's on a rookie contract. And Ryan Fitzpatrick's contract this year is $5.5 million. So even if he were to make a little less at just $5 million, that's a lot of money for a backup quarterback that's not on a rookie deal. I think it's going to be pretty difficult for the Steelers to get someone unlike the only thing I could think about would be someone like a Landry Jones, and that delves us into another kind of question. How much different do you think the Steelers season would go if Landry Jones had been signed by the Steelers? And if that happens, he's not going to be the starter because Rudolph is the starter. But what that means is that Jones is the guy you turn to when Rudolph falters, and then you kind of have to go from there. Because when you think about that, do the Steelers win a couple games that they have lost this year? Do they lose any games that they had won? I want to know what you think about that.
I think that Landry Jones played well when he was extra. I mean, he lost a few games for Pittsburgh back in the day. But, I mean, he also had really nice victories, too. He beat the Cardinals 25-12, which at the time, now that's a joke, but the Cardinals at the time were very strong contenders, and the Steelers should have not even been in that game, really, with Landry Jones starting. But he had some pretty good victories, and I do think that if Landry Jones comes in, I think Landry Jones wins. I think he does better against Buffalo. I mean, I could see him losing another game by accident, like he throws an interception that really kills him during Devlin Hodges' good streak. But I do think that the Steelers win the Bills game. I think they're able to muster up enough offense on that game, and maybe even this game against the Jets too, to make up for like the one loss maybe against the Browns the second time or something. But if you lose the Browns the second time, you're in trouble. So I guess it's all weird in retrospect.
It's hypotheticals, of course, but I think it's fair to assume that he's not going to turn. See, this is the one thing. Even if Jones turns the ball over, and he would occasionally, he's not turning it over. He's never turned it over the way that these two guys have this year.
No chance. Not 4 times in a row.
So I think when you think about it, I think it's fair to think that there's a good chance he'd have led them to a victory against the Bills. I think that's the biggest one you could flip. I think maybe the Jets won, and what was the other one? Maybe that Thursday night against the Browns, but I'm not as sold on that. I think the last 2 games are the ones where you could look at Jones and say he'd have had the biggest impact in those games. But on the flip side, I think you could have also maybe had him not faring as well in a game like against the Browns or something like that. So I think you could possibly you could change 2 losses to a win and 1 win to a loss. So I think 10 wins is not that unreasonable if Landry Jones had to play significant snaps this year.
And not at all. I still think we lose that Ravens game. I think we actually lose worse.
I agree.
Lose quicker in that Ravens game.
I do agree with you too.
I think that there was some magic behind that, and I mean the Steelers really realistically only lost that because Juju fumbled. So.
And because Jalen Samuels wildcat passed for 2 yards.
Oh, that too.
Oh, Pitt ran a wildcat play today, Austin, in their bowl game, and it just made me mad. Of course, it lost like 4 yards too, but I was like, it's not going to work, and it didn't work.
Of course, who would have thought that the wildcat's a little bit, what's the word for it? Cliche?
Gimmicky.
Just, so stupid.
In any case, so this offense, which a year ago set a team record for passing yards and still had a very good ground game, is stuck in neutral. And, the biggest culprit is obviously the quarterback play, but there's more to it than that. So a lot of work to get to as we approach the offseason.
Yes, sir.
On the flip side, well, I guess we already talked kind of about the turnovers and whatnot. Was there any thoughts as far as how the game itself unfolded that we haven't already touched on the offense?
No, not that I know of.
All right. And on the defensive side, another strip sack for TJ Watt. Yeah, they haven't had the huge sack numbers the last 2 weeks, but they're only yielding 2.7 yards per carry on the ground in this game. They didn't get gashed by the ground game. Really, if you take away that opening drive, which you can't, but if you could, the Jets' offense was, again, in neutral all day long. But it almost feels like they're not playing as well because they aren't generating, like you said before, as many turnovers. They're being asked to do everything, and they're only doing most of everything.
And it's a shame. Like, what's it called? The offense can't. If the defense isn't doing it all, if the defense isn't scoring you touchdowns, isn't getting you in the red zone, isn't getting 5 sacks a game, it's just impossible to stay in the game. But, well, I mean, I'm sorry. The Steelers definitely stayed in this game. They only lost by 6, but it's impossible to win the game. It's just incredible how much the defense needs to do to be able to do this. 'Cause, I mean, you look at what they did. I mean, they got the turnover. They got a nice turnover, and that did lead to a touchdown. That T.J. Watt strip sack with 28 seconds left in the second quarter led to a touchdown from Deontay Johnson. But, I mean, it's just they didn't get pick 6. They didn't get an interception in this game at all, actually. And you kind of wish that they did have an interception, but again, just they still played well. They kept the Jets to 16 points. Like, what else can they really do? I mean, like I said, they didn't get the 5 sacks. They only got 2. They played shutdown defense for the most part. They only gave up 3 points after the first quarter. I'm sorry, 3 points in each quarter following the first quarter. Like, there's not much else you could really do. And I mean, especially when your offense is throwing picks, like to set the Jets up and stuff. So, like, really, what more can you ask for them? I don't know. It just makes me sad. The one thing I will say is there's got to be more hustle. The one play that the defense really did bother me was when Bugs couldn't get off the field on a 4th down attempt. Like, you got to hustle. You got to get off the field. It was offsides on Isaiah Bugs and too many men on the field because he couldn't get off. That was really annoying. Then the Jets were going down for a 4th down. The Steelers could have gotten the stop. But other than that, like, the defense played well throughout this game. And you know who's been playing well as of late? Mark Barron.
Yes,
Mark
sir.
Barron's played really well as of late. He's becoming less of like, well, maybe you do keep him around for one more year because he's $6 million. That is a lot of money. But, like, if you asked this question like 3 weeks ago, whether you cut Barron in the offseason, the answer is probably a dramatic yes, because $6 million is worth a lot, especially in the Bud Dupree race. But, like, now it's getting, like, a little bit fuzzy. He had a nice pass breakup in this game. I wouldn't call it nice. He just was able to block a pass with his back, which he shouldn't have been on coverage on, but he was able to do that. He made a few nice tackles in this game. So I was happy with him specifically. I wanted to point him out. He led the team in tackles in this game, so I was happy with him. Bud Dupree also played well. He had 2.5 tackles for a loss, including 1 sack. So he played well. And that's really it for guys I want to point out. Oh, and Jordan Dangerfield came on for 2 snaps or 3 snaps, and he played really well on all 3 of them. He got 2 tackles in that time, including 1 for a loss, so that was good. Oh, one more thing I wanted to say about Dupree. Dupree was able to track down Le'Veon Bell for like a loss of like 9, which was awesome. I thought Le'Veon Bell was going to turn around and run for like a big gain, but Bud Dupree was fast and able to get there for a big tackle for a loss in the game, so I was happy with that as well.
That's it was actually like a loss of 12, which now that I think about it, maybe that's what ruined Bell's stats. Maybe they weren't all that bad before that.
Yeah, honestly, that probably did really ruin Bell's stats. I mean, you take away that 1 carry and he has 24 carries for like 84 yards. So,
is this Steelers offense the worst unit you've ever seen with the Steelers?
it has to be. I mean, it's just really, really bad. There's nothing they're good at. Like, even when Ben Roethlisberger was new to the game and he hadn't thrown a 300-yard game in his entire rookie season, they still had Jerome Bettis running the rock really well, and all that. There's nothing they do well. They don't run the ball well. They
can't even snap the ball well.
The best thing was what they used to be able to hang their hat on was how well the offensive line played. But I mean, like, as of the past 2 weeks, it's just not been. You can't even say that. So I don't really know. This might be one of the worst offenses I've seen.
The only thing I'm going to think about as possibly giving it a run for its money would be the 2009 Steelers special teams unit. They gave up 4 kick and punt return touchdowns that season. Actually, 4 kickoff return touchdowns that season.
It is pretty bad. That is pretty bad. But I don't know. The Steelers can score more than 17 points.
Indeed, they haven't. The last time they scored more than 23 points would have been The Colts game when they had a defensive touchdown from Minka Fitzpatrick, who, by the way, has only touched the ball one time in the past 6 weeks. He has one pass breakup in that time.
And, dude, the offense is so bad.
I'm just saying, like, I got no problems with Fitzpatrick. It's just it'd be nice for him to make a play right now, considering how bad the offense has been.
Yeah, it's just been so sad. I feel like we had to rely on Fitzpatrick to do something for the Steelers to be able to win.
Any other thoughts on the defense right now?
Nah.
Jordan Berry had another rough game. He did have 3 punts inside the 20, but there was one I remember that should have been deeper. Like, it was only a net of 27 yards. He's the last 2 weeks he's looked more like pre-2019 Jordan Berry, and that's concerning.
And that's really sucked. It's coming at such an inconvenient time, like, for him to start being bad. Just really hate it.
So, that being said, let's start moving into everything else that happened around the league. We'll have plenty of time to talk about what's going on with the Steelers this week, but just like last year, you're going to have to win and get help to get in, and it's definitely not the best ideal scenario.
Oh, not at all.
All right, let's get into everything that happened last week. So there were 3 games on Saturday. I talked about them on my preview because they'd either happened or were going on when I was recording. But the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Jameis Winston. Winston's approaching that infamous 30 TDs, 30 interceptions. He's just 2 interceptions away. And the Texans cruise to a 23-20 victory and clinch the AFC South division.
Yeah, the Texans felt that coming. The Buccaneers just weren't really set for this game without Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. They still were pretty competitive, though, I'd say, so good for them. But, yeah, Texans come out with the W.
What do you think about Jameis Winston possibly being the first 30-30 quarterback in NFL history?
Such an interesting quarterback. I kind of love it. I root for him throwing both. I don't know if, some people want him to be paid by the Buccaneers. I don't even know what you do. It's just so weird.
I think you pay him, but not as much as Aaron Rodgers, if that makes sense.
I don't even know, man. Maybe, yeah.
It's going to be really interesting to see what the Buccaneers do because I've never seen a guy do so well to keep both teams in the game.
He really does make the games exciting, doesn't he?
Most exciting quarterback I've ever seen for the reasons of keeping both teams in the game.
Amazing.
The New England Patriots clinched the AFC East division again with a 24-17 win over the Bills. The Bills did have control of the game for a little bit, but the Patriots were the better team and finally got some offense going.
I'm putting this game. I said that the Patriots are going to win exactly by a touchdown and just barely cover. And that's exactly what they won by a touchdown and just barely covered for this game. And, it was pretty good overall. And I'm actually excited to see the Bills in the playoffs, so I think that they make a run. They played close to the Patriots despite the Ravens. I mean, the score anyway. Score was close. They lost to the Ravens 24-17. So I think the Bills can make a run in the playoffs, and this is what I'm rooting for.
Rams and 49ers. The Rams season is ended as the 49ers come up with a late field goal and eliminate last year's NFC champions.
Yeah, the NFC West is weird. I knew that the Rams would keep it close in this. It's just the 49ers have also been really struggling the past 3-4 games. I think they're now 2-2 in their past 4, but they could have easily been 1-3, which is kind of rough after they had such a really good start.
The Atlanta Falcons double up the Jacksonville Jaguars 24-12. I didn't really see much of the early games because of work, but the Falcons keep trying to save Dan Quinn's job.
Since I was at the game, I didn't really see much of the games either. I looked at the score occasionally. I was like, yeah, I probably should have picked the Falcons, but I know the Jags are just terrible. That's just the best way to say it. The Jags are bad, and they should feel bad.
The Tank Bowl we all deserve, a game that went to overtime. The Dolphins raced out to a lead against the Bengals. The Bengals made a comeback, but the Dolphins are able to pull away with the victory, meaning the Bengals have obtained the rights to the number 1 overall pick and are most likely going to take Joe Burrow, but we'll talk about that later. And the Bengals secured the number 1 overall pick in the draft and are on the clock.
Yeah, so, I mean, the Bengals ended up losing, but they ended up winning, and they get Joe Burrow. So Miami is going to be playing for probably Chase Young and another quarterback with all the picks they have. They might end up getting Tua for like a bargain in like the second round or something, depending on if he. I don't think he's declared yet for the draft. He's still on the fence, but because he's first round or not, and he's kind of debating whether to go back. But they might end up with their guy anyway.
Kind of like how the Jaguars waited a whole round to take Jawan Taylor, or the Broncos waited a whole extra round to get Drew Lock, and they still were able to get those guys.
Yeah, man. So they might be ended up with their guy anyway, and a star pass rusher, an elite pass rusher that is going to wreck the NFL once he gets here.
The Baltimore Ravens defeated the Cleveland Browns 31-15. Another big win for the Ravens, but it didn't look like that early on. The way things were going early, it made you think that maybe the Browns had the blueprint to stop the Baltimore Ravens, but then right around halftime, the Ravens woke up, kicked things into gear, won convincingly, and clinched home field advantage throughout the AFC playoffs. The first time they've ever done that, and they did it against the new Browns, who fall to 6-9 and have clinched another losing season. No winning seasons in this decade for the Browns.
It's so sad. I feel bad, but then I remember how they off season, so I don't feel bad anymore. But yeah, thank you, Ravens, for winning that, because that now you don't have to exactly try against the Steelers next week. And there's going to be names like Earl Tom playing for next game, so that'll be fun.
One game that didn't really end up meaning anything, even though at the time the Steelers were hoping for the Saints to win. They did defeat the Tennessee Titans 38-28, but because it was a non-conference game, this is why the Titans, even though they lost this game, are now in front of the Steelers. So even though the Titans lost, which was good to see for Pittsburgh, it really didn't have much of any meaning for the Steelers anyhow.
Yeah, honestly, if they won this game, it didn't matter. They still would have to just lose this next game, and the Steelers would still be able to get in. It really didn't mean much. But yeah, I can't. Honestly, I was surprised that the Saints started so slow. That's all I really have to say about this game.
Yeah, I'm agreed. I'm surprised about that. The Will Grier experiment is going as well as I thought it would after one start. He looked like the worst player I think I've ever seen. That's a bit of an exaggeration. He sucked, though, and the Panthers sucked, too, and the Colts cruised to an easy victory when they've been struggling for a lot this year, and the Panthers are just that fix-it team right now.
I can't say I saw like anything for this game. I really just saw the score. I don't have much to add.
And another Tank Bowl, the Giants win, or maybe lose, depending on how you want to look at it, 41-35 over the Washington Redskins. Pretty entertaining for two bad teams, I guess.
That was a pretty high-scoring affair. Other than that, again, I don't have much to say.
Denver Broncos and Drew Lock have emerged as a team that's playing much better in the closing stretch of the NFL season, while the Lions are making a beeline for a top 5 pick.
Yeah, the Lions are just kind of bad. And I mean, at least the Broncos have some hope going into next season with how good Drew Lock has looked so far.
Oakland Raiders come away with a one-score victory over the LA Chargers. The Chargers fall to 5-10, and the woes of LA continue, while the Raiders still have a small outside shot of making the playoffs one last time. So it's probably not going to happen, but good for them that they're still alive at this point.
Yeah, honestly, good for the Raiders to keeping it close. It's they might lose at making the playoffs, but hey, I mean, anything could happen. Steelers lose, Titans lose, Colts win, and they're in. I think that's how it works.
It might be a strength of victory thing at that point. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So remember what you weren't there. I forgot we did our own separate recordings. I said there's no reason the Cowboys should not win this game. And for that reason, I picked the Eagles. And I was right for that because I just had no faith in Dallas. And my, oh my, that team. I'm tired of hearing people talk about them being a Super Bowl talented roster because I really don't think that they are. But it's impossible to say that they're not underachieving because they absolutely are. I mean, they let an offense led by Carson Wentz, yes, but he was throwing to mainly a converted quarterback playing at wide receiver. He was the top guy in Greg Ward, and they still outscored that Cowboys potent offense. Things are just a mess in the Big D right now.
That's terrible. I mean, the Eagles' defense isn't good. Their secondary is absolutely. It's just terrible. I honestly, needs to not. They just need to not make the playoffs because they're all really sad teams.
There's no way Jason Garrett keeps his job, right?
In fact, that's them mediocre or bad season.
Looks like we're having some trouble with our connection here. For some reason, it seems like it's cutting out. Well, we don't have much left, so hopefully we can just power through it here. The late game, you saw this one at least to a certain extent coming, Austin, so I need to give you props. The Cardinals beat up on the Seahawks 27-13, who don't have their top three running backs now. They lost C.J. Prosise, Chris Carson, and have already lost Rashad Penny. So now they've signed Robert Turbin and Marshawn Lynch. How crazy is that?
Crazy stuff, man, to have Marshawn Lynch and Robert Turbin back. I mean, all they need is Thomas Rawls out. I know that he was on the Jets practice squad for a little bit, but other than that, it's pretty crazy. But anyway, NFC West sucks. That's all. They're good, but like the picking for the NFC West is absolutely terrible. And this is why, again, I chose the Rams plus 6.5. Entropic, which I don't know if that's a word, but I'm making it up. It's a word now. It's the most entropic division I've ever seen in football. They're over.
On Sunday night, the Chiefs were able to easily dispatch of the Chicago Bears 26-3. I don't really have anything to add.
It was a little bit too small.
I'm going to try reestablishing this call. This is just not working out too well. Hello.
Hey,
all right,
I'm back.
We're still recording, yeah. You kept cutting out. The connection was not very good, so I'm hoping that by reestablishing here, you won't keep cutting out.
Okay, cool.
All right. Monday night, the Packers come away with a 23-10 victory over the Vikings, and Kirk Cousins still doesn't have a win on Monday Night Football. He and them are struggling, man. I mean, they're making the playoffs. They're a good team, but I don't see how anyone can believe they're going to get over the hump.
Honestly, Kirk Cousins is going for Teddy Bridgewater in this offseason. I'm trying to get Teddy Two Gloves back. I'm sure he doesn't want to be back there, though, to be honest. I gave up on him, but regardless, can't say I didn't see it coming. It was a really fun game to watch, though. Quarter, I was having fun watching the Packers. Really brought me back in my championship game in fantasy in one of my money league with Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones in the second quarter with 2 touchdowns was really clutch.
And that wraps up our picks this week. So there's only 1 week left to go, and Austin holds a slim, I guess it's not really slim at this point, but holds a 6-game advantage. So he had a bigger lead, but I was able to close it. But I'm going to need a big week just to get a chance at closing the gap. So we'll see how that goes. In any case... Huh?
Well, you'll have a little bit of a smaller chance, but you could still make it back then.
It's not insurmountable, but it will be difficult. Let's move into some Steelers news really quickly. T.J. Watt and Bud Dupree are both now over 10 sacks on the season, becoming the first pair of Steelers teammates with 10 or more sacks in a season since James Harrison and LaMarr Woodley in 2010. Watt is up to 14 on the season, just too shy of Harrison's team record in 2008. Watt also has 7 forced fumbles this season, the most in the NFL. He had 6 last season as well. He's been a big play machine, and he was named the Steelers' 2019 MVP. So all that being taken into consideration, how likely is a run at Defensive Player of the Year and All-Pro for Watt? Because he has been fantastic.
I think it's a good shot. I think that it's him versus Gilmore for that right now, and Gilmore made like a key mistake in the Bills game, which got talked about a lot, which I'm hoping is going to weigh down his on his voting. He he got messed up by John Brown. Like John Brown absolutely broke that man's ankles, and some people say that it was he did what he was supposed to do. I don't believe that. I think he got burned, but TJ Watt's playing at a high level, and I think he's going to be able to win it. I think that TJ Watt is going to come down with the Defensive Player of the Year award, and if he's coming down with that, he should be an All-Pro. That's just how it works. I like his chances for both. I'll just put it that way.
What about Chandler Jones?
Chandler Jones belongs in the conversation. He's and he has. I think he's at 19.
Yeah, he's at 19.
Yeah. His last game against the Seahawks was ridiculous, but I think that's part of the problem. When you look at his games, he just puts up ridiculous games at some points, but it's not really consistent. But I mean, 1970, sure, he got 3 against Seattle the first time they versed. So he got 7 sacks against Seattle this year, which is absolutely ridiculous. But regardless, I think he's in it. But
all right, I'm gonna call you because this is just not working right now.
Okay.
Alrighty then. Sorry about all the juggling we've had to do on today's episode. It's certainly been unique. How you doing, Austin?
I'm doing good. I wish that my connection was better.
Hey, it is what it is. We do what we got to do. Let's keep the ball rolling here. The Steelers activated both Roosevelt Nix and Ryan Switzer off of injured reserve today. Kind of interesting decisions, but regardless, neither are going to be able to play for 2 weeks. So I guess this is something with if you make the playoffs, you have both of these guys back. But I'm not sure what to think of both of those moves, and it also means that Sean Davis's career in Pittsburgh is probably over.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure why you would activate Ryan Switzer. I'm surprised Sean Davis isn't ready and why they wouldn't just choose to activate Sean Davis as a good backup piece. I mean, I guess maybe because Sean Davis would take a backup role and they don't know. He hasn't really played special teams, but overall, I just think that choosing to have Ryan Switzer come back was just, I guess it's just because why not? I mean, you could take 2 back and he's one of the guys you can. I don't know. I would have wished that Sean Davis was ready.
With Mason Rudolph going to injured reserve and Marquise Pouncey unlikely to play, we already mentioned they elevated J.C. Hassenauer, the center, to the 53-man roster. They also signed quarterback J.T. Barrett and safety Trey Matthews to the practice squad. Any thoughts on that?
Nah, I don't have any thoughts on that.
All right. On to NFL news, the New Orleans Saints wide receiver, your man's Michael Thomas, set the NFL single season record for receptions on Sunday against the Tennessee Titans, pushing his season total to 145 receptions, passing Marvin Harrison's mark of 143 from 2002. So with 1 game left to go, Thomas already has 466 throughout his career, and it's almost four seasons. So to give you context, if Thomas had all those catches with the Steelers, he'd already rank 5th in team history behind just Hines Ward, Antonio Brown, Heath Miller, and John Stallworth. Isn't that wild?
That is absolutely crazy, and I'm really glad Michael Thomas is finally getting the respect he deserves. I had already had Michael Thomas in my top 7 wide receivers in his second season, and then he was top 5 really early last year, and no one it felt like no one was really putting the respect on his name. I was like, one of these days people are going to get it, and this year it feels like everyone's like, yeah, Michael Thomas is that guy. I mean, it's kind of easier when one of the best wide receivers is out of football, so you have to focus on someone else. You have Antonio Brown not playing anymore. But Michael Thomas has always been this good. I mean, he's never had this many catches, of course, but this is not news to me. I'm not surprised that he's doing this.
With 1 game left on his current contract and an uncertain future, Los Angeles Chargers quarterback Phillip Rivers has made it clear that he still wants to play in 2020, but right now it seems like his future in LA is murky at best. What do you think happens to the potential future Hall of Famer?
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea where he goes. I think that he could possibly... there's a possibility he stays, though I wouldn't want to stay in LA, honestly, with how bad the fan base is there. And it's not the fan base, it's just how bad the stadium is and all that. Like, I wouldn't want to stay there. I'd want to go to a place where I actually have home games and stuff like that, where I could get a nice contract and maybe play for a ring one last time. But I don't really know where that is. I don't know where there's a situation where you could just plug them in and it's a better team.
And last but not least, the Houston Texans have activated J.J. Watt off of injured reserve. I was not expecting this. I thought he was done for the year, but good for him, and hopefully he helps on Sunday.
That's incredible. The man tore his pec muscle 4 months ago, and he's already back to being able to play. I don't believe he's actually playing on Sunday.
Oh, you know what? It's probably the same thing like you mentioned where he can play in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think he was designated to return. I think I wrote it wrong. He's not actually been activated yet. But yeah, what's it called? It's just incredible that he's even close to ready. 4 months after tearing his pec, like that shouldn't be a thing. He shouldn't be able to be cleared for football, but he is.
It is certainly wild. I'm really glad that the NFL added that option to take guys off of injured reserve. It's definitely been helpful. So, any closing thoughts on this one, Austin?
No.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today on the Stronger Than Steel podcast. As always, if you have any questions about the show, please feel free to check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. You can check out our various social media platforms on the website, and you can see our episodes posted on YouTube and SoundCloud. And you can always email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. We'll be back tomorrow night, which will be Saturday night, talking about what could be the Steelers' final game of the season against the Baltimore Ravens in Week 17. We've already reached the end of the regular season, Austin. How does it go so fast every year?
I don't know. It always is so sad when we're getting to the end of it. Football season goes so fast.
It sure does, but we'll be back tomorrow to talk Steelers and Ravens one final time. I mean, I guess it could happen a third time, but let's get through this game, and hopefully we'll be talking Steelers playoff football a week from now. But in case it isn't, we'll make sure to make the most out of what could be the last time we preview a game this season. So until next time, thank you as always for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. And Austin, thank you for joining me. Have a terrific night, everybody.
Have a good night.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.